Hello, my name is Emily Seal and I'm an instructor for Motlow College. This is a picture of me from a few years ago. If you'd like to read more about my credentials and my experience in theater, you can visit emilybrownseal.com. I've done some professional acting, professional directing, and professional costuming, and I love theater. And if you have just a small portion of the enthusiasm for theater that I have, by the end of the course, I think I will have been successful. So, today we'll start off and sort of try to dissect theater and kind of give you a good definition of which is, very hard because it's a lifestyle for me. It's been a vocation. It's been a place where I've spent a lot of time. It's a group of people who have been my best friends and my companions. So, to sort of sum it up in 30 minutes is going to be kind of challenging, but hopefully it'll be fun. So I'm going to start off in your textbook on page 5 with a quote in the top left-hand corner. It says, "Theater is, above all, a living art form. It does not simply consist of plays, but also of playing. And a play is not simply a series of acts, but a collectivity of acting. Just as play and act are both noun and verb, so theater is both a thing and a happening, a result and a process, fluid in time, rich in feeling and human experience." So you have signed up here for a art credit. You could take, art like painting and that kind of art, or you could take a music class where you got to listen to Bach and Beethoven, but you chose theater. And theater is sort of a collective of all the arts. We have dancing, we have singing, we have beautiful pieces of sculpture that we use on stage for backdrop or for furniture. But theater is above all something live, something active, something that is both a thing and a happening. So today we'll start by going through some of the things that theater is: a building, a company of players, an occupation, its work, its play, its art, its impersonation, and above all, it's a performance. So, without any further ado, if you'll turn your page over to 7, we'll get started here. So today throughout the lecture I'll kind of sprinkle in examples from the ancient Greece. Many of you are starting your classes this semester. You're probably hearing a lot about the ancient Greeks because they are the founders of the Western world. They're the most well-documented, besides maybe the Egyptians, the most documented civilization that we have. And many of our experiments, philosophy, or science even, they begin with Aristotle and Plato and Sophocles and these sort of great thinkers of the Western world. So it'll be no different with the ancient Greeks. You'll hear me talk about them a lot today and then throughout the rest of the semester. Well, the ancient Greeks really were the first ones to write down at least a lot about theater. Theater is in all great traditions, but definitely was a huge deal in ancient Greece. And the Greek word theatron, that theater comes from, means seeing place. And you can see this outdoor arena of a theatron with these stone seats. They don't really look that comfortable, do they? But the theater could be seen as the seeing place, the place where we go to see a play. But theater, drama, the word drama comes from the Greek to do, right? Now, today, if we say drama, we mean the written form of theater. But drama in the Greek, dran, means to do. And so theater is both a place, something that is seen, and something that is done. It is both something you hear and something that is active. So first let's kind of talk about the building of a theater. If somebody says I'm going to the theater, well, most of the time nowadays they mean movie theater, but they're really talking a place where theater happens. So this is a Roman theater. You can see how it's changed after the Greeks. They have those beautiful big facades with big sculptures, and but it's also very much the same. You would often hear throughout theater history people just refer to this as classical theater, either Greek or Roman. If you know anything about history, the Romans kind of just stole a lot of stuff from the Greeks and changed the name. They're very similar cultures. So another time period we'll talk about today is the Elizabethan, which is during Shakespeare's time. This is a rendition of the Globe Theater from a map of its time. But there was also the Rose Theater right across the street with Christopher Marlowe as their playwright. These Elizabethan theaters were also outdoor. They were wooden O's where the groundlings would stand on the ground and the people who could afford it would sit up above. But this is the theater that many of you would visit nowadays. What we would call an opera house, a proscenium theater there, with a stage picture in a picture frame and then the people sitting on the other side. These opera houses became very popular throughout the Western world in the 18th and 19th century. So these involve sophisticated lighting, sets, fly systems where people can bring set pieces down from the ceiling, or you can enter from the wings. But this opera house is sort of what a lot of you might associate with a theater today that you might go see, the Tennessee Performing Arts Theater, the TPAC, or you might go to any number of collegiate theaters probably look like this too. Nice traditional proscenium theater. So we talked about theater as a building. Now let's move on and talk about theater as a company, a group of people. So Shakespeare's day, they were called Lord Chamberlain's men, and Shakespeare wrote his parts for specific actors. For example, Richard Burbage played Hamlet and Henry V and Macbeth and all these great thoughtful characters, and heroes or villains alike, they were the most eloquent. But then he also had Robert Armin, who was a good dancer, so he would write in these clown parts with dancing in them. Whereas when he had William Kemp was a better singer, and so he would have William Kemp sing certain ballads and scatter those throughout his plays. So the theater is very much made up of a group of people who, like I said, the playwright may write specifically for that group of people. And they may tour. The Lord Chamberlain's men went to the royal court and performed there, especially in the Jacobean times. And if we look at medieval touring troops that had jesters and Hell's Mouth, we'll get into all of that later. But this is the Second City Theater. Once again, there is a physical building in Chicago where you can go to see this improv group, Second City, but they also refer to the theater as the touring company, the group of people where you can see many of these Saturday Night Live stars have performed in the Second City improv troupe. And but they're as much theater without a building. The Second City can set up on Motlow's main campus there in Lynchburg and perform outside, and that would be theater without a building, because they don't need sets or costumes or props or a backstage area. They just, as a group of people, become the theater. So once again, theater is a building, theater is a group of people or troupe of players. And then also theater is an occupation. It's a work. It's what a lot of people do for a living. If you're looking at this Nashville Children's Theater picture, there are people who get up every morning at 8 o'clock and they go into the Nashville Children's Theater and they clock in, and that's where they do their work. So I do want to take you to Nashville Children's Theater website and just let you meet some of the theater building itself, but then also some of the people who may be clocking in and going into Nashville Children's Theater every day. So I'm going to kind of get out a PowerPoint here. Yeah, that's my family over here. This is my husband. Okay, I digress. So moving over here to their interactive website, which I just think is fantastic. So down here, we have some of the people. So if you are on page 11 in your textbook and you see here that a producer is the person who is in charge of fundraising, and they make sure that we have the money and they supervise the production. But you'll see here that Steve Bianchi, I'm going to say, is director of marketing. Oh, sorry. Yes, producing director, Scott Copeland. So he is both the producer and the director. I'm sure he loves me bringing up his phone number here. You can go prank call him. But Scott Copeland is our producer and director. So he's in charge of both the money and then the second job listed there, directing, which means that he calls all the rehearsals. He tells the actors where to stand and creates the vision for the technical crew. So this guy right here, Scott Copeland, if you want to get a job in Nashville, he's a good guy to know as both the producer and the director. So an actor, most of you know what an actor is. Designers here. So looking down to their artistic staff, Patricia Tabor is their costume designer. Once again, she probably has a 9-to-5 job, just going in and making costumes and designing them and fitting actors. What's another designer here? The technical director, right? And scenic artist, Amanda Metter there. Amanda Metter probably comes up with the scenery behind the actors. She either paints a big sheet to represent the scenery, or maybe she goes to the thrift store and buys a chair, or maybe she builds a chair with her bare hands. I don't know. I never met Amanda Metter, but I'm sure she is our scenic designer here. And then Michael Redman would help her as the technical director. He would be the one to put all the scenery together and help make sure that everything gets done. The master electrician here, he would be the guy who hangs the lights and makes sure that the stage is lit appropriately for each scene. So those are just some of the artistic staff here at the Nashville Children's Theater. And so that was some of the designers and then some of the builders. You can see right underneath the designers, the builders, the craftsmen, the people who design the costume may not actually be the one building it, although in many cases they are. Crewing. What is a crew team, right? The run crew. They're the people who help the actors change clothes backstage, or turn the lights off and on, or run the soundboard. And so they aren't actually listed here. It doesn't look like. Many of them are probably actors from other productions. I don't know that they're a big enough theater to have a whole lot of run crew. And they also might not just get a lot of billing, because often the run crew are minimum wage employees. So down here, stage managing, I kind of dismissed that. The run crew, it may be a minimum wage paying job, but it is definitely a skill. I'm not saying that running a soundboard or quick change backstage, those are skilled jobs, and not all of them are simply minimum wage. Okay, the stage manager. The stage manager is in charge of when the director's out, and then during the scene, the stage manager is the person who makes sure that everybody's there on time, that keeps everybody on track. They call the cues, so they'll say lights up, and then the lighting person will click a button. So stage manager isn't really listed here either, because, well, and first of all, that would change for every production that they do. They might have a different stage manager. And then house managing brings us to our little backstage tour here. So the house manager is not an easy job. So here we are in the lobby. So if you walked into the Nashville Children's Theater, this is what the lobby would look like. And there would be a person there to greet you and hand you a program. And then you'd see a person with a headset on usually, and they are the front of house manager, and they're going to make sure that the show starts on time, that people get their tickets and get seated. And when you go to see a live production, I'll actually have you sort of comment on how well that process went, because it's an important part of the overall experience that you have. So this is the lobby at the front of the theater, and let's take a look inside the theater. So this is the view from stage. Very cool, huh? What are these little red things up here, they are acoustic panels, right? So they help you to absorb the sound quality, make it better. So back here we have the comfort room for the really young children. But then up here we have the sound booth, which is where the techs will sit and operate the boards, the light board and the sound board, and they'll that's pretty common to put those people up here. And I like it too that you can see from here all of the par cans that's sometimes hidden in a theater, but it's important to know how this is the most expensive theater thing in any theater, these nice big lighting equipment. And then down here we have the orchestra pit, right? The orchestra pit in any opera house is where traditionally the orchestra would be playing. Now, a lot of theaters nowadays put their orchestra backstage or in the wings or down even underneath this stage, but it's still traditionally called the orchestra pit, and it's usually sort of this U-shaped, and it can either indent into the stage or out from the stage. And then they have a trap system, which obviously they're very proud of. A trap is a little part of the door on the stage that you can kind of pull out from underneath and disappear into, which is always fun. So this is what it looks like in the stage of the Nashville Children's Theater. Then back behind there we have what's called the scene shop, and the scene shop is where they do a lot of the woodworking and the painting for the scenery and properties that come on stage. So we have, I think this is really cool, you can kind of click on the prop and it'll tell you what play it was in. So I saw this version of Seussical. It was absolutely fantastic, and you can see those fish that came down for a dream sequence there, and that's how they were used. Here's a little tricycle that was pulled onto stage for Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. Really great book there. And here we have Miss Nelson is Missing. You can see that big can there. And here is The Giver, which is a more serious children's play. But the reason that I like this concept of being able to click on props and see a memory is that's often the experience for a theater artist when you're walking through the scene shop. You can see, you know, that hanging mask from that Greek play you were in, or a big, huge leftover chair that's been in every repertory performance you've seen. And so it's not only a, you know, a room full of stuff, it's a room full of memories. So here we have a costume shop. The costume shop is where a lot of sewing goes on. The costume shop is where the costumes are put together. I've spent a lot of time in costume shops because I can supplement my acting skills with my sewing skills. Sorry, this is kind of taking a minute to load, isn't it? Anybody got a joke? Let's see. There we go. So a scene shop is where we do a lot of the carpentry, but a costume shop is where we do a lot of the sewing or purchasing in this case. So you can see this beautiful classical costume here yeah, and it's funny because, you know, a lot of costumes that I've gotten to wear, beautiful, beautiful costumes, are couture. I mean, they're made just for me. They're fitted, you know, if you've ever bought a shirt and it doesn't fit quite right, it's so nice to have a seamstress who can come and pin and tuck and take it up where it needs to be taken up, and it's just a wonderful thing. We'll talk about masks later on today, so that's kind of some interesting wigs. Wigs are a big part of any costume shop because some of us have unruly hair here. That is a fantastic hat. I wish I could take credit for that. All right, we digress. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to prove the point to you that theater is a vocation for people. It's their consuming life. It's their occupation. It's where they go. Theater can be very similar to sport. It has an audience. It has an element of competition to it. It if you flip channels, you'll see entertainments in the form of sitcoms or movies back to back with entertainments of sports. And reaching back into the Greek times again, the Olympics were probably held in the same building as the Festival of Dionysus. So these Greeks really popularized both sports and theater. And there are a lot of similarities. We play a game, and then theater, we call that players, being playing. And theater definitely has a playful quality to it, especially comedy. A sense that we are mischievous or childlike, even. That's my nephew right there in the blue hat there. He is obsessed with Captain America. And that's his friend Toby, dressed as Thor. Funny story, my nephew Samson likes to pick up that Thor hammer and throw it at things and people. But when children sort of play these roles, child's play, it can be a learning experience. A lot of the mimicking and role modeling that they're doing, they're pretending to be their mother, they're pretending to be their father, they're pretending to save the world. This is, and ultimately it's practicing. It's practicing for the big event there. So if you're on page 12 in our book here, your author, Robert Cohen, makes a strong point that sometimes these child play moments are something deeper. If you look at hide and seek, that is a game that could actually happen in real life, right? A parent getting separated from their child. And that's a deep fear for a lot of children. It's called separation anxiety. So when they play that game of hide and seek, it's really kind of rehearsal for a bigger moment, or the possibility of something really scary happening in their lives, or them having to hide from a scary person. So some of this child's play can have a serious tone to it, or can have a lighthearted tone. And it is in some ways very similar to theater, because we are sort of playing and acting out the same way that a child would. We're still on page 13 here. We're talking about theater is art. It is intangible, it is creative, it is imaginative, it is elegant, it is powerful. It is an experience that I like to think of art as soul food. If I'm having a bad day, I'll put on my favorite song and sing along, and it nourishes my soul. It gives me energy, or something mythic that can't necessarily be described. Well, the theater does the same thing for me that a good song does. I should say good theater does the same thing to me that a good song does. It renews my faith in humanity, if you will. These craftsmen who made these costumes are obviously skilled. If you ever saw the Broadway show Wicked and heard Idina Menzel's voice or Kristen Chenoweth's, you would know that they are skilled singers with beautiful voices that are worth sharing. These dancers that you're seeing in this picture are skilled dancers. They've got great moves, and that are just spectacular to watch. So theater is art, and it is requiring of skill, requiring fineness of form, and it's beautiful. And I think we all need a little more beauty in our lives. So next we get into theater as impersonation. If you don't have anything else to have theater, you have to have an actor portraying a role. And it's funny how we talk about actors and characters as if they're the same person, or as if they're the same thing. Many of you who are of a younger generation, you think of Christian Bale as Batman. I personally still see him in the role of Newsies, because that was my movie when I was little. Some of you have a different Batman in mind. Maybe you were raised when George Clooney was Batman, or you still like the hunky Val Kilmer and his husky voice, or any of these other guys here. How do we separate the actor from the character that they play. It can be very confusing, especially with big characters like this, Friends. It was a huge show. It ran for so many years on the air. And, when you think Jennifer Aniston, are you forever going to think of her in her capacity in Friends? Or can you separate her in a different role and take her for a different person? I mean, these personalities are so similar maybe to their own, right? How much is Courtney Cox really like who she was on the show? It could be very confusing. Well, one of the ways that they did this in ancient Greece is the actor always wore a mask. The ancient Grecians were very mystical about masks, and the actors would take a moment to sort of meditate on the inside of the mask, and when they put it on, they believed that the gods would inhabit their bodies and play out the characters, or the ancestors who, if he was playing Oedipus, he believed that Oedipus would actually come and inhabit his body. And it is sort of a mystical process for a lot of actors. Here in America, we call method acting, where we kind of retrieve our own emotional stories or draw on our own emotional experiences to play out a role. And many people, sort of speculate about this. Heath Ledger died very famously during his portrayal of the Joker when he was playing Batman in the Batman movies, and how much did the psychology of the Joker sort of infect Heath Ledger's mind and make him, a little less stable. So as we look at the impersonation aspect, it can be sort of dangerous. It can feel sort of risky. What is the real world and what is the imaginary world can sometimes be very borderline for theater artists. You look at G.K. Chesterton, the famous Catholic theologian, called it the dangerous imagination that many theater practitioners have. And you can see the grotesque mask here. The person is very, very, very happy or very, very, very sad. And we'll get to talking about that and the nature of ancient Greek theater later on. So here's some masks in the modern day. These are the Jabberwockies. They were on America's Got Talent, their dance crew, and they did a great job of infiltrating that mask and using it as they danced. This is the ancient Japanese medieval theater of Noh, which is a Buddhist ritual. They also, once again, believed that Buddha would inhabit these masks as they put them on and stepped through the ritualistic sort of walk. Commedia dell'arte, which is not at all religious, is a very bawdy, very comic Italian tradition. You can see the grotesque faces there too, and Commedia dell'arte is very fun, and we'll talk about it more. You can see the wart on the one at the bottom in the right hand corner there. He's got that wart sticking up. He was a servant. The guy, the red face and the big huge nose, he was the master. So some of these masks were specific to the person playing them, and if you walked in and saw someone wearing that red mask with a big nose, you automatically knew he is Pantalone. He is the caricature or the archetype or the stereotype of him. So same thing if you're watching a teen movie and you see a guy walk up in a football jersey, you know that it's a teen movie, so he's probably going to be a jerk. And if a guy walks in with glasses, he's probably going to be a nerd. So those same sort of stereotypes were used back then. So who is the impersonator and who is the impersonated? Who is the actor and who is the character is really the essence of theater and the backbone of what we're doing. And you kind of have to, as an audience member, you have to suspend your disbelief. You have to allow yourself to believe that the person behind that mask is not there anymore, that they are the character now, which can be sort of difficult. So here are some situations where we have an audience. If we have a schoolyard fight, you can see all the people sort of standing around. The witness on the stand, that lawyer may wink at the jury. They are the audience now. even in silence, sometimes we can be acting out a role. Shakespeare very famously said, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players." So, as we talk about some of these concepts that happen within the art of theater, they can apply to your everyday life, right? What colors catch people's attention? What how to frame a story or tell a story. You know, the same principles that apply to playwriting apply to telling a good story in a social gathering, right? A good party story or something. So that's Ferris Bueller there. And this is presentational. If you're following along with me, we are on page 15. Presentational is the type of relationship with the audience where you make direct eye contact. So Ferris Bueller very famously had these moments where they would do what's called breaking the fourth wall, where the actor would make direct eye contact with the camera. And that was sort of something new that he was trying again there, but it was not something new for the theater world. All of Shakespeare's plays, all of the classical works would involve someone looking straight into the eyes of the audience. If you look at stand-up comedy, works this way. The Blue Man Group, you can see that Blue Man. It's a theater style where we've got these guys and they're silent and they do all these miming and such, and they come out into the audience and they've pulled people up on stage. And this is a trend I see going on in Broadway right now. We've got Putnam County Spelling Bee and a lot of these plays that involve pulling the audience up onto stage, and that I think is kind of an advantage we have over film. And I think it also, if we talk about trends going from theater to film and film to theater, or TV to theater and theater to TV, you look at the reality TV movement of pulling everyday people onto the screen. I think that, you know, pulling people onto the stage is sort of a reaction to that reality sitcoms, you know, kind of a mirroring of that. So that's called presentational, when we admit that you're the audience and we're the actors, and we make eye contact with you and we pull you in and we ask you questions, and it's a give and take between the audience and the stage. This is a scene from Dexter, which is on Showtime, and this is John Lithgow, and he played a very horrible villain. And this is just a picture of John Lithgow in the bathtub. It really didn't have anything to do with Dexter, because in John Lithgow's autobiography that he wrote recently, he talked about a scene that he had to get completely naked on stage and get in a bathtub, and the bathtub water always had to be hot. And so he would get up out of the bathtub and his legs would be all red and swollen, and not, you know, not painfully swollen, but, you know, in the way that hot water turns your legs red. And I just think it's an interesting version of representational theater, where everything is exactly like it would be in real life. Infamously, in your book, they talk about a scene where they took down an entire restaurant, from the crown molding to the silverware setting, and they took it all down and they moved it into the theater and set up an exact replication of a realistic theater. You know, we look at plays like Raisin in the Sun, where the iron on stage had steam coming out of it. But these sort of tactile details, where we really see everything represented as it actually would be in the real world, that's called representational theater. And in representational theater, the relationship between the audience and the people on stage is very distanced. The people on stage never make eye contact with the audience. I remember when I was in dance as a young girl, in studio dance lessons, we would always get in trouble for peeking out of the curtain and making eye contact with people in the audience, because you didn't never want to break the fourth wall and you never wanted to acknowledge that the audience was there. Representational theater is the standard way that theater is done, trying to represent reality and not make eye contact with the people in the audience. So, as I was saying before, there's a responsibility of the audience to get into the play, to let themselves believe. I don't know if any of you have sat with that person when you're watching a movie who's like, that couldn't happen in real life. You know, they go to see Twilight movie and they're like, you know, vampires can't sparkle in the sun, and they won't let themselves suspend their disbelief. They won't let themselves get into the play. They won't allow themselves to embrace the mystery and the magic of the situation. So I'm really going to challenge you when you see a live theater production this semester that you will be willing to suspend your own disbelief, that you'll let yourself get into the play and lose yourself in the story of it. I had an acting teacher who would say, stay in it, stay in it. And you really have to imagine and let the audience members take you there. I mean, the actors take you there as an audience member. One of my favorite Shakespeare lines in Midsummer Night's Dream is when Oberon says, I'm invisible and will overhear their conference. And he snaps his fingers. And of course, if we were doing a movie nowadays, Oberon wouldn't have to say that. We would just pull him out of the scene, right, and say he's invisibly there. But Shakespeare believed so much in the ability of his audience to imagine that moment that he just had to say, I'm invisible. And the audience said, yes, you are. You know, and the same thing happens when my little nephew Samson says, I am Captain America. Right? And I just have to say, yes, you're Captain America, you know, and you can fly. So to what extent do we believe in the magic of theater? What extent do we let ourselves go there? That's Deborah Messing there from Will and Grace. And that's an example of presentational staging. Presentational, remember, is when we look the audience right in the eye, when we admit that this is a play and we don't try to create a realistic experience. So obviously a mustache on a stick is presentational. There's nothing about that that says this is realistically a mustache. Obviously it's a fake mustache. And there's a whole brand of theater where people are making obviously fake decisions, right? The scenery moves because some guy walks out there and pulls a rope and we watch the scenery move. They're not trying to suspend our disbelief. One of the most famous ways that we can do this is someone walks in with a piece of paper on it that says 5 years later, and then they walk out. Or Bertolt Brecht famously did this for each scene. He would walk in with a poster that said how the scene ended. And so, you know, so much for these action movies with high stakes where we're waiting on the edge of our seats to see what's going to happen. He wanted to tell his audience members exactly what would happen in the scene. Like, okay, this is the scene where, you know, the daughter dies. So the poster board would say, daughter dies in this scene. And then the scene would start and we would know what was going to happen at the end of the scene. Bertolt Brecht loved this presentational staging because he believed that the magic in the theater was the knowledge of it, the ideas of it. And he didn't want people to get lost in the illusion or escape into the entertainment of it. He wanted to challenge their minds. Bertolt Brecht famously said, theater is a hammer with which to shape society. He wanted to change the world through theater, and he did it through these sort of admitting that you're the audience and we're the actors sort of way. And we'll talk more about Brecht later. I don't want to confuse you too bad by bringing him up. He's a confusing figure, but we'll talk much more in depth about Brecht later, that famous, wonderful German director. So, we're talking about the relationship between the audience and the people on stage, the actors. And in presentational staging, we're admitting to the audience that this is fake by using things like fake mustaches there. So what is the difference between film and the stage? And I have a picture there of Alec Baldwin. He has a very famous podcast called Here's the Thing. Very funny. I highly recommend it if you're a fan of podcasts, if you like to download, you know, these radio broadcasts to your phone or your iPod or whatever. I highly recommend Here's the Thing. It's very interesting interviews that he does with different figures, Kathleen Turner and I can't think of any of the other people he's interviewed right this second, because I really wanted to tell you about his conversations that he has with Kathleen Turner, and just talking about the difference between film acting and stage acting. And film comes out and it's very glamorized and it's definitely a high-paying gig, but trust me, When you're waiting on a film set, it is definitely a hurry up and wait situation. I mean, you stand around and do the same scene over and over again. You're waiting, and the lights and camera, all of it's in your eyes, and there are 50 people around. If you're trying to do an intimate love scene, they're all staring at you, and it can feel very forced as an actor. I much prefer the stage where there's that the actor is able to suspend their disbelief as they play out this scene. And it's interesting to hear Kathleen Turner talk about her experiences in film and how she's just sold on the stage now. The stage is the only thing that she'll do. When actually, in reality, if we're being honest, most actors do the stage to get noticed and then go to Broadway to make the money, or go to LA and get, a film contract to make money. But it's often the experience of actors that they start in the theater and then move into film. But many actors still do both film and theater, famously often to build their credibility. They can do action movies, but then they have to go play Hamlet for producers to take them seriously. So it's different. For live theater is different for the audience, but it's also different for the actors. It's very different than the stage. This is the Apollo Theater, which is a very famous theater in Harlem in New York City. It's famously competitive. It's a black theater, traditionally for African American audiences. And comedy acts are shown at the Apollo, singing acts are done at the Apollo, and especially on their Wednesday night talent search nights, they will boo you off the stage. If they don't like you, if you start and they're not interested, they will boo until you physically leave the stage. So audiences can have an effect on a performance, and the performers are not immune to the audience reaction. If the audience starts crying, it can affect the mood of the scene. If the audience boos you off the stage, then in most cases that is effective. The audience can be there in togetherness. This is a Harry Potter premiere where they're all standing in line and dressed up in costume. I love opening nights for the theater and for movie theaters. I love that feeling of a midnight premiere show. I will never forget seeing Lord of the Rings after being a huge fan of the books for a long time, and the camaraderie that I felt with other people in the theater about these guys are the true hardcore fans. Seeing Wicked in the theater at TPAC after singing along to the CD for years and years, finally getting to see a live performance of it with other people that I knew loved the play Wicked as much as I did. I mean, these experiences are among the audience, and we feel a sense of camaraderie that you don't feel when you sit at home alone and watch TV by yourself. So there's something to be said for the audience experience, and I feel like I'd be amiss if I didn't at least mention this horrible event that happened at a premiere movie theater, and I really hope that this shooting in Colorado doesn't affect that opening night feeling for movie theaters from here on out. This wasn't the first time that it happened, though. Of course, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln very famously happened in a theater by an actor. So theaters used to actually be pretty dangerous places to be, not necessarily because of the guns, but often because of the fires. Anytime you had a lot of people in one place before we had fire marshal rules or, codes about that kind of thing, then, even Shakespeare's theater burned down many, many times, partially due to a cannon scene in Henry V. Okay, well, I know you just met me, but I'm going to start the semester here by telling you something that happened to me as a performer. The theater is live, and when I was doing this repertory theater, I was playing Luella Parsons, and she comes out at the very beginning of the show, and she gives a page-long monologue. And it was in rep. I had done the show for probably, 10 performances before this night. Actually, it was the afternoon matinee. And the house lights did not go out, which means I could look directly at the audience. And I could not remember my first line. And it was mortifying. I felt like my blood was on fire. I felt more nervous and afraid. In the theater world, we call this going up on your lines, when you can't remember your next line. And like I said, it was partially just because of this lighting faux pas that I could actually see the people in the audience. And then going back and rep every night and performing that show again was really difficult to do after having stood there for a good solid minute, having forgotten my monologue. But this is part of what people love about the theater, and something that can be really uncomfortable about the theater is that it's live, and if you mess up, it can be extremely painful. And Alec Baldwin, when he was talking to Kathleen Turner about, would you rather do theater or film, she likes the excitement of that. But I have to admit, after blanking on my lines that time, I know the pain that can come with having messed up on your lines. This is obviously a scene with other people in it. When I went up on my lines, I was alone on stage, but that was my purple dress that I wore there for summer theater in the repertory at Southern Arena Theater. So, I say that to say that theater has a live aspect. Mistakes happen. People drop things on stage. Scenery gets caught on the ropes. Quick changes don't happen and people have to stall on stage. So theater can be a more exciting experience sometimes because mistakes happen and it's immediate and the show must go on. It is a performance. So, theater is also can be seen as something written down, the drama of it, the recording that we have of Ibsen and Chekhov and Shakespeare and Sophocles. These famous playwrights add hugely to what our understanding of theater is. And one of my favorite things about being a theater practitioner is sort of diving into these play scripts and experiencing history as it was, as it's recorded by the people of the time. This is a reading, which is the first couple rehearsals, and a director usually has people sit around a table and then they read the play aloud and kind of get a feel for what the play is going to be like. And this diving into a script, looking at the blueprint, is only part of the story. If you had to read Julius Caesar by Shakespeare as a 10th grader, then you really only saw part of the equation. The way that one actress plays Portia and another actor plays Brutus can be completely different. How do they interpret those characters? It becomes a living thing. So play scripts are part of the story, but they're not all of the story. And we'll look at a play text here at the beginning. If you have not already bought Joe Turner's Come and Gone, that's a supplement to your textbook. I only require you to buy the drama, the theater brief version by Robert Cohen, and then here Joe Turner's Come and Gone by August Wilson. So we will start pretty soon on reading Joe Turner's Come and Gone. So just to review, we talked about chapter 1 of your book. We talked about theater as a building, as a company of players, as an occupation, as work, as play, as art, as impersonation, as a relationship between the actors and the audience, and as scripted and rehearsed. So, theater is many, many things. Next chapter, we'll be talking about what a play is. Thank you for listening.